Hello and welcome to Education Alchemist YouTube channel. This video is a conversation with Professor Gilly Salmon and Allison Miller. Allison Miller is a teacher in a vocational education training and assessment team at Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne, Australia. In this discussion, they share how to enable cultural, safe environments for online learning, an essential consideration for inclusive and effective education. This conversation was originally recorded for a course Allison delivers to upscale teachers in the vocational sector at Swinburne. Throughout the discussion, they reference their learning management system, Canvas, as well as the university policies, principles, and support services. If you're from a different organisation, you may want to check for equivalent resources in your own context. We hope you find this conversation insightful and useful. Thank you.
So, look, creating a safe learning environment is so important. It's really it's almost like a prerequisite to ensuring that learners are feeling that they can concentrate on learning something new. What would you say is a safe learning environment? A safe learning environment?
Well, let's just say a little bit about what a safe learning environment what we mean by a safe learning environment, because I agree with you, it's very important. But when you put the culturally safe bit in, it gets a bit scary, I think. And sometimes I start thinking about different things. So first, for everyone listening, don't be put off by the term culturally safe. I'm thinking the term culture here is what's usual, what our norms and values are. And what you're really doing, you're creating a little special environment online where everyone feels safe and gets to know each other gradually in a way that's acceptable for them. Because the term culture may mean quite different things for different groups of people. But it does mean that we need to look outside our own cultures and what might be quite fixed ways of viewing the world. So it's not the easiest thing to do. So that's why Alison and I thought it would be a good idea just to have a chat about it and see if this is some help to you. So do you see what I mean by that, Alison? That is quite a hard thing to get to grips with.
So I know when we're teaching teachers to become the teachers, that's a question they often ask, like how do you be inclusive and how do you be culturally safe when you've got such diverse audiences? And so I think there's an opportunity for us to discuss then what are some of the things. So for me, a culturally safe environment is where somebody feels that they belong and that they feel that it's okay to take some risks, which again is scary when you're first starting a course. You're not sure who else is in the room and what their expectations are and who you are as a person and what people might think or judge you as. So what's some of the things that you might suggest to an online teacher, what they can do to create a safe, culturally safe environment when sometimes they can't even see their students or their students can't see each other because, you can only see so many heads on the screen if you're synchronous. And if you're asynchronous, you might not see any of your colleagues at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about the not seeing. I mean, some of the time you will. You'll be in a sort of environment like we're in. But even if you can't, the non-visual environment is actually less discriminatory. So in the early days of getting to know people, sometimes that can be a good thing. So it might be unusual for us, but just think of it as a way of people gradually taking their times. But most important, give them things to do together. That's how they get to know each other. There's no good in just demanding that people follow rules or that they do get on with each other. Give them simple, easy activities to do together that are relevant to your topic, and you'll see they start to understand each other that way. And I've got a list of things I do quite early on, like take a picture outside your window and talk about what you can see, or if you're brave, show a picture of the devices you're using, things like that. Easy things actually helps them to get to know each other quite a lot. And I think also, I think it's important to consider what we mean by environment. I mean, for example, if you're in a Swinburne or any designated learning environment, workshop, lab, so on, it's taken as read that the rules apply and that everyone should be respectful for others. And some people just don't treat the online environment in the same way. I suppose it's because we're so used to working online through social media, maybe. But the way to think about it is that Canvas, or another Swinburne provided platform, is actually exactly the same. It is a learning environment, and it's been given to us so that we can learn. So I think that was what makes it safe, because you know people are logging in, you know people have the same objectives as you, the same purpose as you, and that's so then we can show respect and value, and that's where we can avoid discrimination or marginalising people. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that guidelines in inclusivity and communication need to apply to all environments and all participants, regardless of whether we're online or offline. And no, we are all still learning how to do this well. It's still early days, and it will be at the beginning of your unit. So take time for it. Don't expect everything to happen at once. And it's really a good idea for teachers to say something like this at the start. And also, of course, we have to try and model it by our own behaviour and style of communication. So not much really. What do you think, Alison?
Sometimes what I'll do at the very beginning of a class, so that the very first time they get together, is use the whiteboard and ask them to brainstorm what do they want to do to create a culture. I might not use the word culturally safe, but to create an effective learning environment, which is what we're actually saying. You know, that what do you do to create this effective learning environment? And it's interesting, most of them will know exactly what to do. So it's an adult learning environment. They'll know what to do. And then what we do is we make them their rules, because they're the ones who have come up with these ideas on how to create an effective learning environment. They're their rules. It's very rare that you need to bring it up, but if you do need to remind them of any of those rules, I'll use that term. I'll say, well, these are our rules. These are the rules these are your rules. These are the rules that you started, so that they take some ownership. The other thing I do in the collaborate space is I remind them, I record those sessions, and I remind them each time that I'm recording the session, so everything that they say and do will be seen by somebody in the future. And if they think it's a time that they want to discuss something that shouldn't be heard by others, then we should be pausing that, and so forth. So just kind of, some reminders about being in an online space is a little bit different, because if you were to do something out of the ordinary in a classroom, it's not captured on audio or video. But if you do it in an online environment, it is captured. And so you need to keep that in mind about your behaviour.
Yeah,
And
sure. Might be just as hurtful though in a class.
It would be,
just as impactful for the
absolutely.
first person who's receiving it. Yeah. I just think it's challenging, but it's a brilliant idea. I love the idea of doing that. Yeah, definitely.
So that segues nicely into, well, what if we do have students? So there has been, over the last couple of years, I've been listening to some of the behaviours that experience, especially, let's say, post-lockdowns, especially in the Melbourne area, that some students were people were significantly impacted by those lockdowns, and then coming out of that, some of their mental or their way of expressing things has been quite different than perhaps pre-COVID times and so forth. So if we do have learners with a different perspective, maybe about a culture or about other diverse background, and they are not necessarily treating their fellow learners the way they should, what sort of strategies might an online teacher do there?
Well, I have my own little checklist. you know, of what I would do. I can share that with you, and perhaps I can see whether yours is similar. But I think the first thing I do is try and assess the situation, you know, whether it's an intentional comment or a recurring pattern, or whether somebody's just trying to deliberately be nasty to somebody else, because I think they are different. So I really try and sort of reflect a little bit on what's actually going on. And then I'd probably start by trying a private discussion with the individual involved, help them to reflect on their behaviour and understand its impact. Because I found some people say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realise I was doing that, you know, so we're all learning from it. Then I might try, if it was serious, to use the opportunity to reinforce the expectations that we have for respectful and inclusive interactions with the entire class. Perhaps, you know, your way is to refer back to your original brainstorm. I've got some other ways where I do through activity that as well. So it's in a learning moment for everyone, because we are, you know, I think these things are difficult and are changing, so that everyone gets a chance to learn something. And then you've got to think about the person who's been affected. And so I'd need to check in with them to ensure they feel supported and safe in continuing. Obviously referring them to services if really needed. And then I think I've got a kind of a restorative area. You know, I need to reinforcing respectful dialogue to resolve misunderstandings. I don't think punishing or removing learners is great. It would have to be very serious to do that. We want to teach people how to promote constructive communication and understand cultural differences. So that was my little checklist. What about yours? Is it different from that?
No, I think it's very similar. I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, where as the teacher, you're role modeling that respectful behaviour, and you know, you are listening and you are empathizing and doing all the things, and you're demonstrating that you care about your learners. And I think that makes a difference to them creating a safe learning environment, because you know, they start to then build those, you start to build those relationships. And I just maybe remind people that Swinburne's quite lucky, or maybe other institutions have them, but we have an area of Swinburne called Safer Communities, and they have some fantastic strategies to help teachers. So if a teacher's not feeling safe or feeling that they've got a student who's a little bit disruptive in some sort of way, then the Safer Communities can give the teacher some strategies, but they can also intervene, and they're often very
I'll
keen.
come along there, get some help.
Yeah,
sure.
they're often keen to hear as early on as possible. So even if you just touch base with the Safer Communities and let them know that you've got a feeling about something's not, that a student's not behaving the way you would hope that they would, even though you've tried all of your strategies, that they'll keep a track on that.
Yeah,
So
that sounds really great. Yeah, so I hope people will use that. It's a great service. And how you presumably you've got service for learners as well, have you?
So certainly the students can go there as well. So Safer Communities is two-pronged. So students can go there, and then there's higher levels or different services around the other things that affect students. So we know there's societal, psychological type things that interrupt people's lives, and Swinburne has student counsellors and so forth that also enables them. And if we're using the Canvas course templates, then that information should be in all of our Canvas courses. And if it's not, perhaps that's something people can reflect on in their Canvas course. What do we have around? We have the student success coach, we have the learning and academic support team, we have the Safer Communities, we have the student counselling and so forth. So, exposing students to that information as often as possible. Sorry, I retract that. Not as often as possible, but in different modes. So we do tell them in orientation, and it may be on the website, but it doesn't mean that students absorb all of that information. So if it's there in your your Canvas course as well, then that's really useful.
Sure.
So Julie, in my experience, in terms of developing my own cultural competencies, it's a bit like everything in teaching. The more you learn, the more you realise you don't know. And so I think it's a journey creating culturally safe learning environments. What sort of professional development might a teacher
Yeah,
do
I
or
mean, it is a journey, and also things are
reflect on to
moving.
help them with their own culture?
Expectations are moving as well as our own journeys and our own need for change. And every class is different as well, isn't it? So it is continuous. So I think we need to, first of all, be aware that we all do have unconscious biases. So you have to keep yourself alert, especially with a new class, and engage, in recognizing and addressing those. And you can do that by talking to colleagues, or you can do courses on it if you want to. And then I think other things is seeking learner feedback. I think gradually, as you gain confidence as a teacher, you can regularly check in with students about how inclusive and welcoming they are finding the learning environment, whether it's, synchronous, asynchronous, on location or online. Again, bearing in mind that what feels inclusive in one cultural context may not work in another. So you should try and seek feedback from diverse learners and be as flexible as possible in your teaching methods, because that's also, to give everybody a chance to get used to what you're doing. Obviously, we need to try and keep up with research and resources. Sounds like you've got some good ones, but again, they will all change. So to recognise this is an area of professional development, just like, pedagogy or technology is as well. And also Swinburne will change its principles, I expect, over time as well. But probably for me, the most important thing is collaborating with peers to, share experiences, whether it's in a structured way or over coffee. And if you've got a problem, talk to colleagues to continually refine your approaches. And don't forget to learn how to use interactive technology, not just to deliver what students need to know, but aim to create, these learning spaces where all learners feel seen, heard and valued. You will find that students from different country backgrounds and different cultures, some will do better online than they will face to face. So it's really great if you can do that. So it's really about continuous learning and adaptation, and taking the opportunity for anything that comes along to be learning ourselves as educators. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it hits the nail on the head for me. So you talked about that unconscious bias. I've been reading some things around the neurology of the brain, and that's actually, some of that primate stuff that actually the reason we have this unconscious bias is to keep us safe, but we don't need that anymore because we actually live in quite safe learning environment. So, we needed to make sure that if we didn't know somebody previously and we couldn't communicate very well with them, do we do the fight or flight type stuff? So some of that's there to protect us, but it's also that then raises when you consciously know your bias. So there's a few that I know now, the more I have to check myself, there's some things where I realize that I have this bias, and it's generally because of the upbringing that I've had, and so therefore I need to make sure that I keep that consciously front of mind there. But that checking in, I just want to perhaps plug one of the other systems that we have in the Canvas course, and it's Ziplet. And Ziplet is it's a whole range of different stuff, but it's a survey come questionnaire, and it can be set up quite simply, and students can answer anonymously. So it can be something teachers could use, and we tend to use it about week 3 or about a third of the way through the course, start to check in with students where we're at. You know, are they understanding? Is there anything we could adjust, etc., in our teaching? And then that allows us to make the adjustments in this course and not the next course when those students who aren't there anymore. So we try to use Ziplet early on so we can get feedback and then make those adjustments as early as possible.
Okay, I think it's true. I mean, you have to acknowledge that we're all the product of our own cultures as well. I mean, we're not super women and men, are we? We're all human too, fortunately, still just about. So that's great. But it's good that you've got that sort of help. So I think it's really just about being aware of attempting inclusivity. And trying to avoid things getting in the way of learning and building your own little learning culture where people feel safe, because we can't be all things to all people. Whereas if you can gradually create a culture where they will relate well to each other, again, do it through activity rather than telling, then really you're adding maturity to your students, in their learning styles and approaches. Well, good luck, everyone.
I was just going to find and also preparing them well for the workplace, because our workplaces are very diverse as well, and so that's enabling students to be prepared and mature enough to be effective in the workplace as well. So thank you.
Future.
So thank you so much for your input there, and good luck to everybody on their journey of creating culturally safe learning environments, especially in the online learning environment.
You're very welcome. It was great to talk to you, Alison. Bye, everyone. Bye.
See you later.
Bye.